Welcome to the Skeptic Zone, the podcast from Australia for science and reason.
Oh, yes, it's the Skeptic Zone, episode number 163 for the 3rd of December. Oh, it's really the 4th of December in Australia, but you know, these time zones. For the 3rd of December 2011. Richard Saunders here with you from a very nice, sunny Sydney, Australia. Blue skies. It's a gorgeous day. Can't wait to get out there. But before I get out there into this wonderful Sydney weather, I better fill you in about this week's Skeptic Zone. It's a Maynard Feast Spectacular Special Bonanza this week on the Skeptic Zone. Maynard with more really interesting interviews from the Australian Skeptics National Convention held a couple of weeks ago right here in Sydney. Maynard catches up with Barry Williams, a very long-time skeptic here in Australia, one of the people who originally kicked off the Skeptics, or was originally involved. He was the president of Australian Skeptics for many years, and then our chief executive officer and editor of the Skeptic magazine. Retired now, but it's good to catch up with Barry Williams anytime. After then, Maynard heads down to Darling Harbour, where we had our Skeptics dinner. Our convention dinner, chats to Dr. Rachie, what's she been up to these days, and her opinion on the TGA and some other things. Then Maynard's feature interview with one of Sydney's most respected plastic and reconstructive and cosmetic surgeons, Dr. Cholm Williams. What an interesting interview, and one that anybody considering cosmetic or reconstructive surgery really should hear. The ins and outs, as it were, of this specialised form of medical care. Dr. Cholm Williams coming up. And after the break, it's Maynard back again, this time at Skeptics in the Pub. Now, we had Skeptics in the Pub here in Sydney just in the past week. I was the guest speaker, and I spoke about power balance and being on TV. While I was doing that, or just after, Maynard was running around with his trusty microphone asking people in the audience what they thought of the TV show I was in. That was The One, and what they thought of my involvement. That's interesting to hear. I didn't know he was going to do that, but I'd like to play those little clips for you. If you saw the show, I'm sure you have your own opinions all about that. Now, I must say thank you so much to everybody who jumped onto Facebook and sent me birthday greetings for last Monday. Yes, last Monday. Thank you, everybody. Goodness me. I read every greeting, I promise you. I was just absolutely bowled over by the number of greetings I got for my birthday. My Facebook page went on forever. Thank you so much. And if you'd like to join in some really interesting discussions these days, it seems to me, going on my Facebook page. I seem to be the centre for skeptics and believers to come along and put their point of view and dare each other and do all sorts of things. If you head for the Skeptic Zone website, www.skepticzone.tv, scroll down the left-hand side, you'll see Richard Saunders' Facebook. Click on that and become my friend. Why not? If for nothing else, then to join in some of the, lack of a better word, debates, discussions with skeptics and believers in various magical things. In fact, we've got a few people on there at the moment. We're trying to convince to apply for our $100,000 challenge here at Australian Skeptics. And who knows, even the $1 million James Randi challenge too. Now, coming up at the end of the show, more information about how you can help our dear friend and reporter Maynard get to Las Vegas with some items up for auction on eBay. But for now, I'm going to run downstairs, run into my fridge, pick myself up, open the fridge, and get that bottle of birthday champagne, have a nice, relaxing champagne there. In fact, I'll come back upstairs with my champagne and enjoy, with you all, the Skeptic Zone.
Here's Maynard's spooky action at a distance.
Well, it's all happening here in the lunchroom, but right now I'm with the big cheese of the Australian Skeptical Movement, Barry Williams. How are you?
I'm very good, thanks, Maynard.
Are you big cheesing it around? Are you lording your skepticality over everyone in the room?
I'm no longer big cheesing. I retired a couple of years ago, and I'm now sitting back and telling them where they're going wrong. That's my main role now.
So you're an agent provocateur these days?
Oh, yeah.
Well, they always have been. You've always enjoyed a good stir.
Yes, I always did, and I like the old French word éminence grise, but unfortunately I'm no longer grey, I'm pure white, so don't know if that works. Éminence blanc, no, sounds silly, doesn't it?
Now, just for those listeners that don't know your illustrious career, what year did everything kick off?
1980 was the first Skeptics was set up, and then we started publishing the Skeptic magazine 1981. And I was in from the beginning, and I wound up editing the magazine as a temporary thing for 19 years. And in the end, I thought, I'm getting too bloody old for this, so I retired, and I'm delighted the way they're carrying it on. It's doing a great job.
Look, I spoke to you at TAM Australia. That's when I first met you, and at that stage, I asked you what was interesting you in the world of woo and misrepresentation of science. What's on your what's in your beard at the moment about science going wrong, or people misrepresenting it?
Well, I'm sure there's still lots, but as I say, being retired allows you to actually read science fiction instead of science books. One of the great things about retirement, I'm reading all the books I always wanted to read, but didn't have time to read because I was reading all the things I had to read. So I think in the health area is probably still the most immediately dangerous thing, some of the quackery that's going on. I was delighted to hear this morning that someone behind the SensorSlim scam was arrested in Queensland.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yes, because was it a Victorian skeptic that was under that one, or?
There are a number of them from around the country, yeah. But
Now, do you find now you're retired and you're reading for pleasure, it's so much more fun, like you said, because all the stuff you had to read, there was always a time deadline, that kind of thing, and now you can just take all day to read one chapter or reread it if you want to.
Oh, yeah, I'm reading lots of fiction and stuff. I mean, I enjoyed reading the...
Now, judging by your beard, you strike me as an Asimov fan.
Indeed, I enjoyed Asimov's stuff, and I enjoyed Asimov. He was the one that really got me onto science. Because, I studied it a bit at school, but I was never very interested. And I read a whole heap of the collections of Asimov's brief pieces about science of all sorts. And that's what got me fascinated by the whole thing before I became a skeptic. Well, I suppose I was a skeptic, but a smaller skeptic.
So since 1980, do you think things have got less skeptical or they got more wooish? Well, that's actually the same thing.
Yes. It's a bit hard to say. In some areas, we've had a lot of success. I mean... I remember the famous Carlos hoax that James Randi put on. That alerted a lot of media to the fact that if you keep giving unthinking credit to a lot of woo merchants, you were likely to get bitten, and that had some good effect, but there's still plenty of it around. I mean, I think we're not getting any less sceptical, but... we're becoming more tolerant of other sorts of crap in life. You only have to watch television if you can bear it. There's hardly anything worth watching anymore.
Well, that's why we do some reading.
Yes.
Look, it's been great talking to you again, Barry.
My pleasure, mate. Nice to see you again.
Well, we're here on the high seas on the front of the South Stone, looking out over Darling Harbour, and we've got Captain Rachie there, known as the Batman of Skepticism.
And I'm the king of the world. I shouldn't say that, really, should I? But this is kind of weird, Maynard, because this boat appears to be leaning, even though it's stationary and it's not moving. But it does seem to be moving forward, doesn't it?
Actually, what's your favourite pirate movie? Every skeptic loved pirates movies.
Pirates of the Caribbean?
Get out, really?
Well, I don't know. I don't watch many pirate movies. I just like that Johnny Depp's quite camp in that film.
I love the Mythbusters episode where they looked at pirate myths, where you could, wearing a patch over your eye helped you see in the dark downstairs in the ship. Although I don't think it's called downstairs in the ship. I don't seem to remember at any stage in Titanic yelling, "We better go downstairs."
I don't think it is either. Is that a euphemism, downstairs in the ship?
I think it is. Look, we're on the poop deck, and I'm the best boy, as they say. Actually, I think I'm the cabin boy, actually.
What is it? It's not actually called a poop deck, is it?
I've obviously been going to the wrong place.
Right.
Hey, what's going on inside here? Like, we're out on the deck. In there's skeptics masticating.
Well, there's no mastication at the moment because we don't have anything to masticate, but there will be mastication. There's a lot of discussion about the events of today, Maynard.
Yes, I was there at the TGA discussion. I had an earache and was trying to meditate, and I thought, no, the last thing you want to be doing in a room full of skeptics is to be caught meditating.
Yeah, well, did you hear what happened? Because I know you were hoping there was going to be a Springer moment.
I was hoping for Springer. I had the chair ready to go.
Yeah, well, we didn't need security after all, so nobody
When is someone going to go crazy and get dragged from the room? It's the only reason I turn up at the skeptic stuff.
You know, there was heckling at one point, but it didn't last very long, and someone said shh, and they stopped. So that was about as lively as it got, I'm afraid. I think the skeptics are just too polite sometimes.
Not even someone at the back going, bullshit, nothing like that?
I was going bullshit quite a few times. In fact, the moderator, Christopher Zinn from Choice, gave me a shout-out, in fact, because he mentioned he'd been to the Skeptics website today, and the lead article said the TGA is ineffective, and he said there was a quote there from Dr. Rachel Dunlop saying, dealing with the TGA is like playing whack-a-mole. And so I sort of sunk a bit lower in my seat, but then later I couldn't help myself going, bullshit. And he did see me a couple of times. But I think the outcome of that panel was basically that the TGA is... To deal with the TGA is to play a game of whack-a-mole, and that's not going to change anytime soon.
I also heard the talk from the head of the TGA, and, you're looking at his budget and what he has to do, they obviously can't do everything, and I can understand why they do put the budget into what they consider to be higher risk things.
Yeah, but then they kept comparing themselves to Health Canada and saying that, we're pretty much on par with Health Canada, but we don't seem to be performing as well as Health Canada. And I know that they've recently been consulting with Health Canada, in fact, because they're trying to change the legislation around complementary medicines, or OST-L products, as we sort of discussed a little bit today. So the overwhelming thing I got from that panel from Dr. Rowan Hammett was he was just apologising, but not really giving any indication that change is afoot. It was really like, well, we can't do this and we can't do that and we couldn't do that and we don't have enough staff and we can't.
But a lot of the things he was talking about would require legislative change as well, and a whacking increase in their budget.
I agree it would require a legislation change. I don't know about budget. He didn't mention that. But yes, it would probably require legislation change.
And that's really hard. That's lobbying. That's fighting against interest groups.
Well, no, I don't think it is. I mean, that's part of the reason why they had the transparency review recently, so they could gauge where they're going wrong. Plus, they had the National Audit Office go through their books and basically call them out for having about 90% of complementary medicines breaching regulations. So, I mean, the thing that I found interesting about what Rowan was saying was he kept saying, well, we want to focus all our efforts on really dangerous drugs, so like the ones that work. So, people get sick from overdoses of paracetamol all the time, but in the meantime, they're just completely ignoring what's going on with CAM. And I don't think that, even making slight changes like actually looking at evidence before they let people register things would be that difficult. I don't know. And the other thing is I don't think they should be funded by the industry. Now,
this is something that a lot of people on the alternative medicine side would also agree with you with. I've heard podcasts that are all about alternative stuff complaining that the TGA is in the pocket of Big Pharma for exactly the same reason that you are saying here.
It's a conflict of interest, and that applies across the board. But the interesting thing about alternative medicine people is they keep squealing, oh, but Big Pharma. Big Quacker has a huge amount of money. Big Quacker sells about $2.5 million worth of products. Or billion.
Sorry, I can't let you use terms like this on the podcast. I think you'll find the clinical correct term is big placebo. Oh, big placebo.
Okay, big placebo makes an awful lot of money. I mean, there are some companies that I can't mention who certainly are in negotiations with the TGA about regulations of CAM therapies, and in particular this was off the back of the recommendation from the National Audit Office that complementary medicines have a big stamp on the bottle saying not tested. And there's certain companies in Australia who are very unhappy about that because they stand to lose a lot of money. So the difference that, I think the real point of this, Maynard, is the difference is that in Australia, if you're a big pharma, you're not allowed to wine and dine doctors. You're not allowed to wine and dine the TGA. You're not allowed to even give doctors a pen anymore. There's a lot of legislation about how you can actually behave around your, doctors and the TGA. With respect to big quacker or big placebo, they can still do that. They wine and dine pharmacists, they wine and dine the TGA. So whilst they're also paying for the products to be on that list, they're also taking those people out that are regulating that, feeding them wine, feeding them parties, feeding them all sorts of stuff, and then saying, oh, please don't be mean to our products. That is a conflict of interest. And that does not happen with Big Pharma. So the people that say, oh, but Big Pharma runs TGA, I think they'll find that's probably not a lot of evidence for that.
But you have to understand the TGA's point of view in that they have a limited budget and they see the other end of things as being much more dangerous, where they see some harmless diet pills that really have no effect either way as not really contributing to as much harm or potential for harm.
Well, that's when we think, I guess that's when we talk about scams and whether it's ethical of them to let scams go on. I mean, I think in an ideal world, I think they should be swallowed up by the ACCC. I mean, we had a guy there today from the ACCC. They actually take action, They had Peter Foster arrested today for his role in censorship and other things. So to me, it just seems like the TGA is chasing their tail. They're saying, oh, we haven't got enough money. But what are they doing with that money? Nothing. I don't think they're doing anything with that money that I can see. And, Rowan Hammett was all about, oh, we don't want another thalidomide in this country. But they're taking advice on products like that from the FDA anyway. So they're not doing clinical studies into thalidomide. They're not doing clinical trials. That stuff's coming from overseas. So as far as I can tell, they're sending memos to each other and making excuses. So that budget, $120 million a year, would be better spent by someone like the ACCC who could actually do something useful.
So how do we, as skeptics and people who want to be a bit more active in this area, do anything? I mean, is it writing a letter to your Member of Parliament? Is it getting out with a sandwich board and a funny hat? Which is probably the route I would take, because I find that always worked.
I'm going to do a nudie dance later on tonight.
What's that? Between the sandwich board and the nudie dance, I think we've got real social change.
No, but actually, seriously, somebody did ask this question of the panel today, and Ken Harvey responded that you should write to your MP. So, for example, there's a lot of legislation that is currently sitting on Catherine King's desk. She's the MP who's in charge of the TGA or overseeing the TGA legislation.
Wouldn't it be safe if she just kind of kept it in a drawer? I mean, it could blow off the desk, might get lost over the weekend, cleaner could mix it up.
Possibly, yeah. I don't know exactly where. I don't know if Ken has precise evidence that it's sitting on a desk. It might be in a filing cabinet, but suffice it to say she hasn't moved on it since March 2011.
See, I just demand the irrelevant facts at all times.
Well, you know what we should do? Considering I'm a Batman, apparently, of skepticism, we should fly there with our undies on the outside of our pants and see if we can find it.
So when do you think there'll be some movement on this? When do you think it'll actually get off a desk and go somewhere else that might be useful?
I have no idea. I mean, how long's a piece of string? I don't know. I don't think Ken knows. I don't think Rowan knows. I mean, Rowan couldn't get out of there fast enough to drive back to Canberra. I mean, I have to say, I did feel a bit sorry for him. He was sitting on a panel with a guy from the ACCC, Ken Harvey, who's a serial complainer, or has been labelled a serial complainer, and Christopher Zinn from Choice, who just 2 weeks ago gave the TGA a dishonourable mention in the Shonky Awards. So he wasn't actually in a friendly environment.
It's a long way to drive from Canberra to Sydney for a hiding.
Well, I believe he'd already been at a conference in Sydney earlier this week, I think in Darling Harbour, in fact, which is where we are now. So I don't think he drove all the way for that, as far as I know. But I don't think there's going to be much movement in the near future, Maynard. I think we're just going to have to wait. And all you can do is just keep pushing the MPs, because they're the ones that can change the legislation if that's what needs to be done. Rowan Hammett's between a rock and a hard place. He can't do very much, and so, of course, he's going to make some excuses and obfuscate, because what else can he do? I mean, honestly, I think he's a bit embarrassed, and he should be, because it is embarrassing. Basically, his organisation is doing nothing, and he's sitting next to a guy from the ACCC who's beaming today because he arranged to get Peter Foster arrested this morning just in time for the convention. Although that may not be entirely true.
Now you're falling prey to conspiracy theories. Next you'll be hosting Jesse Ventura's Conspiracy Theory Show, which should be fun. I'd like to see you on that.
No, well, it was a coincidence that Peter Foster was arrested.
The ACCC is in bed with the Skeptics.
But the ACCC are pretty happy with themselves at the moment. And poor Rowan was sitting there going, well, we can't do anything because our hands are tied. So, I don't know. You just got to keep fighting, and one day maybe we'll see the legislation change. And the thing is, it's about consumer protection in the end. It's not about a bunch of grumpy skeptics jumping up and down, hand-waving. It's about protection of the public, and it's about health claims that can't be substantiated. So it's in the bigger picture, it is important that this happens, but it's going to take a long time.
And before we go, what's your latest thing in your sites? What's the next one you're going to be looking at? Who are the next bunch of people you're going to be annoying, basically? Well,
basically, I was walking to this dinner tonight, and Loretta Marin shoved an envelope under my face as she walked past me.
That would be her substantial bribe. She often pays to the Skeptics for her award.
Well, no, there wasn't money in there, but I think it's one of those things
why does anyone pay attention to her if she's not handing out envelopes of money? It's the way I work.
I think it's that kind of deal where you read it and then it blows up or something. And I haven't read it yet, but it's something to do with traditional Chinese medicine. And she's saying that that she wants me to look at some traditional Chinese medicine claims. So I think that's something I've got to do next.
I take 5 or 6 grams of ephedra every day. It's never affected anything I do.
Of ephedra?
Ephedra.
Ephedra, what's that?
It's what they get ephedrine from. And I think if you want to get it, I think the only way to get it would be through Chinese herbalists, as it has a somewhat amphetamine type effect.
I see. Is that why you're talking so fast tonight?
Correct.
Okay. We have to go and eat now.
Okay, bye. Actually, I'm not very hungry. I might just have a few drinks to go home. I might have a few drinks and run home.
Goodbye, Maynard.
Well, I'm on the front of the boat, and the boat seems to be getting a distinct lean on it, or it could be just the nights going on. But someone who was going on and going off, kicking the day off at the conference this morning was
Dr. Cholm Williams.
And what was the name of your talk? It had a great title.
It was called The Even More Skeptical Plastic Surgeon.
Now, how long have you been in that cosmetic industry for?
Well, I'm a general plastic surgeon. I do reconstructive and cosmetic, like all fully trained plastic surgeons do. I've been in private practice after my years of training here and overseas. I've been in private practice since 1974.
Now, what attracted you to that field? You could have been a regular dermatologist, you could have gone into gastroenterology, you could have gone into neurology. Why plastic surgery?
Well, I went into general surgery first. I did a full general surgery training and then found that the challenges of plastic surgery, the reconstructive side of it, particularly at that stage, intrigued me. So I then went into plastic surgery here and then did 3 more years in Britain and America, purely in plastic surgery in overseas units.
And what do you think has been the most exciting development in cosmetic surgery, in the last 10 years?
In cosmetic or in plastic surgery generally?
As a layman, I'm probably getting the terms mixed up here.
Well, look, I believe that the two aspects are part of the same spectrum. I think cosmetic is to do purely with appearance, reconstructive is function, and most surgery is a mixture of the two, and I do believe that you've got to be a properly trained surgeon and trained in cosmetic as well as reconstructive surgery to do either of them properly.
Well, what is the latest development that actually has efficacy?
Well, that's...
I had to say that. Yeah.
Silly question. I don't know. Medicine generally and surgery overall is, of course, progressing. We all hear about the surgical triumphs, treating people with limb injuries and replants and burns and treating of melanomas and so forth. But as far as cosmetic surgery, we're altering appearance, and in my book we're trying to create normality, either restore or create or enhance normality. And my emphasis is always on normality. I think we're trying to produce a result that looks normal. It may well be enhanced according to the patient's wishes, so that they like what they see in the mirror in the morning and have a good day because of that. But I think the aim is to have it normal, and ideally in a few months' time to have the patient even forget they've had the surgery, because what they see is something that they regard as normal, something they've got used to, and it just literally skips their mind at that stage. If they're still looking in the mirror and seeing some reminder of their surgery months later, then it usually means that something's not totally normal.
How huge a psychological component is there when a patient comes through the door? You've got to try and figure out why they're doing this and whether it is really, truly a healthy change.
Well, it's all about their body image and whether their internal body image is realistically equivalent to what I see. Now, if a patient comes in and says, I ask them, what what do they see wrong, what would they like me to try and do, and then I'll sit down and I'll interview them, usually for about a half an hour the first time, but I don't lay it on too hard as far as the details, because I don't think too many people really register what you've said in the first consultation. Now, most people are feeling a bit embarrassed if they're coming in to ask about what is in effect cosmetic surgery. They think the surgeon's going to laugh at them. And I find with most people, while I'm watching them, and I guess I'm getting a bit used to, after all these years, watching the body language, watching the patient's reaction, if I say, no, I'm not laughing at them, they kind of relax and the shutters drop and they don't really hear very much more. So we have a chat and I give them a brief overview of what we can and can't do and a very brief overview of what they can expect, take photographs, and then get them back a week or two later after they've given them information brochures, so they've had a chance to think about it, to read the brochures. I encourage them to get another opinion if they'd care to. I don't think there's anything to be gained by telling them I'm the only one that can do this. And if they care to come back in a week or two, I've got the photographs there. Very often people don't see themselves as the camera does. And I say, well, this is actually what you like. It's back to front because you're used to looking at it in the mirror, but that's really what you look like. And tell me again if you've got some questions relating to the brochures, the information I've given you. Let me tell you again what I think I can do, and let me give you a full rundown of the potential complications. I don't make any bones about saying, look, I can make you worse. Plastic surgery is real surgery. I can make you worse. If you come to see me to have some change in your appearance, and if I make you worse, then you're going to be devastated. And we see this all the time when something goes wrong. Now, all surgery has got potential risks, including all my surgery, and I tell them quite clearly that I've been around long enough to either see or have just about every known complication, which either means I'm not very good or maybe I've got some idea of how to avoid them and recognise them and treat them. And that's the way it is. Now, if you want me to operate, and if I'm prepared to operate, and I knock a lot of people back if I can't produce the result that I realistically think they want.
What is the major red flag for you where you go, oh no, this person...
Patient that's pushing me into surgery and doesn't want to hear about things that could go wrong. Because they can. That's life. Things can happen. And if that sort of person is pushing me into surgery, I'll always get them back for a third consultation. My personal practice is to have people back for as many other consultations, no charge, after the second consultation, because it's in my interest as well as theirs that they should be as fully informed as they want to be or as I think they need to be. Now, there's a grey area here which follows on from that Rogers and Whittaker court case. How much do you tell the patient? Now, I do, in fact, say to people, look, this is real surgery and people die under the surgeon's knife, but you'll spoil my record because I've never actually had this happen. But it's like crossing the road. The more careful you are, the better the chance you've got of getting across the road. Somewhere out there today, somebody who's careful is going to get run over. And it's the same with surgery. You don't have surgery unless you've got a good reason, and I'd say nobody operates on me without a very good reason. But this is the score. These are the pros and cons. And if you're prepared to accept that sort of situation, I'll do what I can to help you. If you don't like the sound of that, well then maybe you ought to go and think about it some more.
Now, in your talk today, you were probably dealing with people who work in the area that probably don't take as much care with their patients as that, and they're probably just interested in a rotating cash flow.
Well, I believe that if you're going to do this sort of surgery, you've got to be a fully trained surgeon, postgraduate surgery, that is. In the olden days, 50, 60 years ago, by the time you got out of medical school, you really had a pretty fair grasp of everything that surgery had to offer, apart from the more sophisticated things when you would send a patient off to a true consultant. Well, this situation doesn't apply anymore because the scope of medicine is so great, including the scope of surgery, that you can't hope to have that complete extent of knowledge in surgery by the time you come out as a postgraduate doctor in your first year or second year out. So then if you want to do any sort of serious surgery, you've got to go and spend a number of years, and then sometimes it's another 5 or 6 years, doing postgraduate surgical training in a particular specialty because the knowledge is so involved and so extensive. So in my book, I don't think it's appropriate to come out as a fresh graduate and then start doing any sort of significant surgery because you really don't have the background of wound healing, wound management, surgical anatomy, all the sort of things that you need to know if you're going to operate on somebody, that I would want the surgeon to know if he was going to operate on me.
So do you think it's just merely a cash motivational thing?
Well, I think it probably is the case because I think general practice for many people is perhaps not challenging enough, and I think the the financial rewards for general practice in many cases are really are less than they deserve.
Do you think it's a little bit underrated within the medical world? I mean, it's preventative frontline medicine.
What is?
Being a GP.
No. I come from a family whose father was a GP. He was an old-style GP. I have the most enormous respect.
I just feel that sometimes that they don't get the support and rap that they should get.
I'm sure they don't. I mean, I have great respect for GPs. I don't think they get adequate remuneration. I think they carry a lot more responsibility than we give them credit for, but I think a lot of them feel that their situation is inadequate in terms of the challenges and in terms of the financial rewards, and I think a lot of them then drift into cosmetic surgery because it looks like an easy thing to do, and it is by and large an area where a lot of people see that they can make money a little more easily. I think it's very hard to make money out of that sort of surgery because you've really got to put a lot of effort and time into it. I don't think it's easy surgery, even though it looks easy.
It is easy to get customers, but I guess.
Well, I think if you advertise, now I'm old-fashioned, I don't believe in advertising. I don't think roadside billboards, I don't think these glossy ads with fancy-looking befores and afters. I think a lot of these are the kind of come-ons that I would expect perhaps a bit more appropriate to used car dealers sometimes. You know, it's the bait and switch almost in some cases, and I think that's not fair. And I think it may well be that some of these surgeons actually don't know the potential problems. You know, it looks easy and they'll tell the patient it is easy. Whereas those of us that have been through the mill for so many years, and as I say, have seen just about every complication and had most of them, it slows you right down, and you're very reluctant to talk a patient into any surgery because you know what the downside could possibly be.
And look, when I look at myself in the mirror, I go, gee, I wish I could look 10 years younger. And I could probably maybe do that if I just maybe lost a bit of weight, exercised, maybe changed my lifestyle a bit more. Do you think a lot of people that turn up at your door sometimes are in that category?
Well, absolutely. And I try and tell people that it's not just a case of having surgery to make up for your deficiencies in your lifestyle. Losing weight, certainly exercising, all those sort of things that we all ought to do. And I confess to them that I'm sitting behind a desk and I'm not exercising as much as I should.
It's a hard sell on that stuff, but isn't it?
Well, exactly. But then I say, well, I'm not having the surgery. So you're having the surgery. So, in fact, you ought to be the one that gives me the best possible material to work on. Smoking is something that's a real problem. If a patient says they're smokers, I just tell them that their complication rate's going to be far higher. And that's something that, smoking does interfere with wound healing.
Yes, and what is the effect of it? Is it sort of what does it change in the body that makes it more difficult?
Well, I guess it produces the wrinkles. You see a smoker with the facial wrinkles. I'm sure it does something to the elastic tissue of your skin, so you look older. As well as that, it does cause your blood vessels, for whatever reason, to shrink down and close down a bit, which is why smokers have problems with their hearts and so forth like that. But it also means with a lot of the surgery we do, when we're lifting tissue and we're pulling it tight and doing the sort of things that you're not supposed to do with surgery if you want a wound to heal. You don't undercut it, you don't lift it off the base, and you don't pull it tight. But, if you don't do that, you don't get the lifts in lots of different parts of the body. So that the judgment comes in working out just how much to lift and how tight to pull it to get the result, but not go too far and cause trouble. And then if the patient, of course, is a smoker, then all those little blood vessels that are struggling to survive in your operation shut down, and you can get some major problems with wound healing. And that's something I spell out to people. I don't kid them about it. Clearly it's up to them if they stop or not. If they're really bad, heavy smokers and bad candidates, I'll refuse to operate. But, basically, as long as they fully understand what they're letting themselves in for, and I might modify the operation a little bit because they're a smoker, if I feel it's still appropriate to operate, perhaps not take them quite so close to the edge of wound healing problems.
And in your talk today, what do you find is the area where things are getting pretty wooish and shonky in the cosmetic field?
I think advertising. I'm an old-fashioned doctor with an old-fashioned doctor father who felt, as I still do, that it's not appropriate for doctors to advertise like used car salesmen. So I think the sort of money that's spent on advertising in the cosmetic surgery field completely, often misleading, is quite inappropriate for what it should be an ethical profession. We're not selling used cars, we're selling potentially serious surgery, we're potentially valuable lifestyle changes, which if they go wrong could devastate the patient. So I don't think you ought to somehow or other con the patients into thinking it's easier than it really is.
Now, with shows like the Kardashians and all those glamour magazines, Photoshop must be sending you a lot of work.
Well, I've got views about Photoshop. It's not supposed to happen. I mean, Photoshop, yeah, in the magazines, yes. It's not strictly legal, and it's certainly unethical to use Photoshop on your before and afters if you do that sort of advertising. But it does tend to put a gloss on this sort of surgery that I think is inappropriate. And I'm sorry about that, because this is real medicine, it's real surgery, it's got real risks. It can do enormous good, but if it goes wrong, it can do a lot of damage.
And what is the growth area in cosmetic surgery at the moment?
Well, I think all cosmetic surgery, particularly the minimally invasive things like Botox, like fillers, like the latest thing that's being pushed a lot is the use of a lot of threads, in particularly in the face and even in the breasts, where you put these little surgical threads through that lift the face up or lift the breasts up. I think it's totally inappropriate in the breasts, and I just don't think it works too well in the face. And they do have complications, but it looks easy because you do it with local anaesthetic. You put a needle through, you pull a thread through, you pull the needle out again, and you leave the thread there hoping that the face stays up. And sometimes people will put in 10 or 15 threads in a face. And I think, as a general rule, these threads can act a little bit like cheese wires, because with persisting gravity, they can tend to cut through the tissues. And I don't think you can guarantee that things are going to stay up where you put them, even assuming that you don't get the sort of potential complications that you get with foreign material put under the skin. Nor do I think it's going to last a long time, even if these are dissolving stitches that theoretically leave little threads of fibrous tissue where they used to be that somehow hits your face up. I just don't think it works like that, but I'm not into threads, so perhaps I'm biased against them. But it's an idea that's been around for, a couple of decades almost, and the answer seems to be to put in more and more threads that some people are doing, because it seems easy. It's supposedly not a proper operation. You do it under local, patient walks in and walks out, and maybe they get an early good result, maybe they have problems, maybe it just doesn't last. And of course, if a thread on one side of your face breaks but not the other, then you've got a kind of a lopsided look. Not a good look.
Now, as a cosmetic plastic surgeon professional, is there someone in the media, someone that's had some work done, and you go, wow, that person got a good job done? Hey!
Oh, yeah, well, I see a lot of people that look pretty good for their age, and good luck to them if it all goes well. So, that's fair enough. I'm not...
Who is the poster child for good plastic surgery in your book?
Oh, I can't give you names like that.
Oh, well, I think we'll just have to end the interview here. I think the complementary medicine people are firing some cannons.
Have you heard about QED? The exciting Skeptical Conference, 10th and 11th of March 2012.
Quite exciting days.
You're probably wondering, why should I go to QED?
Quasi-existential dilemma.
We'll have the investigator and legend Joe Nickell.
Quite extraordinary detective.
Alternative medicine expert Edzard Ernst.
Quacks endure difficulties.
Monsters, werewolves and lucid dreaming from Deborah Hyde.
Quirky, eerie demons.
Massimo Polidoro, head of the Italian Skeptic.
Questo egregio dottore.
David Aranovich and conspiracy theories.
Quite easily debunked.
Secular campaigner Mariam Namazi.
Quell equality detractors.
Sarah Anglis will show us how to play the theremin with robots.
Quivering electronic devices.
Ufologist Ian Ridpath.
Quiz extraterrestrial details.
Professor Steve Jones and why creationism is nonsense.
Quiet and evolution deniers.
Podcaster and spoonbender Richard Saunders.
Questions ESP demonstrations.
Author Ophelia Benson.
Queen existentialist debater.
And we'll have comedy from Robin Ince and guests.
Quality entertainment, definitely.
Tickets are £89 and they're going fast, so hurry.
Queue everybody directly.
Could you cut that out? You can get your ticket from qedcon.org.
Quote event domain?
Marsh, seriously, if you don't stop that, I'm going to have to hurt you.
Quickly end discussion.
Come to QED Manchester.
Question, explore, discover.
We're just here at Skeptics at the pub, and I'm with someone that I haven't seen since we had probably the most successful Skeptics at the pub ever, which was just before TAM last year. Who have we got here?
Shane Harvey.
Now, wasn't that a great night? We had all the Skeptics Guide to the Universe people. I think George Rab was there. Everyone was there. It was a wild night, wasn't it?
Oh, it was fantastic. One of the best ever. Yeah.
And look, I know Skeptics have a reputation for having a bit of a drink sometimes, but that night everybody cut loose.
Yeah, I'd say that they did. Just a little.
But I'm talking to you tonight because at Skeptics at the pub, Richard Saunders is going to have a chat about being one of the judges on The One, which I imagine can be a bit of a lot of skeptics really, they wouldn't have had time for that, but Richard was out there doing the stuff. But you actually went to one of the tapings of The One. How many?
Yeah, 2 of the tapings.
You went to 2 of the tapings of The One, so you saw all the stuff that they chucked away. And what did you see go to air?
I only watched one of the episodes on television, so not sure how the others went, but it was cut up to pieces, really. So out of, 4 or 5 hours of taping, then cut into 40 minutes. It's a lot of cutting.
But you were sitting out in the audience where Richard wasn't. He could see them. You could hear the people whispering and conspiring to each other. So what was the reaction of the general audience around you to what the psychics were doing?
The majority of people surrounding me were 100% believers and didn't really like a lot of the comments that Richard was saying. But I've forgotten the other lady's name, the White Witch.
Stacey DeMarco.
Yeah, just nodding along and in agreements and confirming all their beliefs, I guess, and reassuring themselves.
So are you saying that they probably wanted to burn Richard at the stake?
I'm sure if they had an opportunity, some of them might have taken that. But the people sitting directly next to me were, maybe I was just fortunate to sit next to people that were skeptics and could pick out faults, and they were like, but that could have been anything, and a little bit more thoughtful in their process.
So do you think the people were undergoing a process of what some people would call confirmation bias?
100%. I think that's what we all do in just some respects, and it's hard to turn that off.
Did anyone around you get cold read by the psychics?
No, everybody was on the complete opposite side of the room, so maybe that was fortunate.
Now, were you hoping that they were going to hit on you?
Partly. Just to see what they could come up with and what their reactions would be.
Now, obviously, it's been a bit of a divisive show in the skeptical movement because some people are for it and against it and that sort of thing. And what do you think it's actually a useful thing to get people to thinking skeptically, or you think the show is so biased towards there being a phenomenon like that?
I think it was definitely geared towards people believing more in some kind of supernatural power. But I guess that's the whole nature of the show anyway, was to create Australia's top psychic. So they can't really go, we're going to discredit you, because that would be defeating the purpose of the whole entertainment, I guess.
So they probably would have gone and made it anyway, so I guess it was good that they had someone like Richard at least saying something.
Yeah, and I think he maybe had to tone his opinions down a little bit to conform to what the show was. He couldn't completely go out and... on the...
Look, it's a little bit like when I'm doing a radio show and there's 2 people with opposite opinions. If they go really hard at each other, what you get is a screaming match, and it may be interesting radio for some, but it just gets nowhere.
Yeah, and it actually turns people away, I think, and does the opposite of what you want to do. So I think just maybe gentle encouragement every now and again is probably more positive than negative.
Okay, thank you. And look, also I'm just talking to Steve, who's here with Casey the Wonder Dog. Steve, how are you?
Oh, not too bad.
Now, it's not a bad venue here for our Skeptics, is it?
It's not too bad. It's second time I've been here.
Now, did you get to catch up with any of The One or not? Did you actually...
I think I saw all but one episode.
Yeah, and what did you make of it? Because it could be a divisive show amongst skeptics.
Yeah, I think painful was the word I used to describe it most of the time. I really got a bit annoyed with how they only gave the judges sound bites. I really would have liked some more feedback.
Yeah, and how do you think Richard performed in such a situation?
Probably about as well as could be expected.
And it was amazing how they look. I wouldn't have minded if they'd had a few more clear hits, but it was almost like they had to take the one who was the least wrong.
Oh, it was. It's Australia's least mediocre psychic. It's terrible.
In fact, do you think you could have done better at some of the sections?
I reckon I would have got Don Bradman's cricket bat.
Yes, because when they felt it was a cricket bat, if you'd felt it was a bit old, you could have guessed it was maybe his, couldn't you?
Well, I think there was like 2 or 3 people you could have guessed who you would have had a fair chance of it being right.
And how did Casey go? Like, as a is she a Labrador or a Golden Retriever?
Labrador.
Oh, well, they're the most psychic of all dogs, aren't they?
She was psychic enough to know that it was going to be terrible and didn't watch it all.
No, we did very well, yeah.
Look, I'm just talking to 2 people who were really big on getting some of the books that were being given away. What were the great books you managed to now be the owners of?
Oh, some fantastic stuff about new physics and spirituality. And
what was one you were keen on?
It was an Edward Case.
The Sleeping Prophet.
Yes, exactly. It was about reincarnation, and the other book was...
I think he might be the guy who predicted every pope till the end of time.
Yeah, he did a good job. He did a very good job.
Okay,
yeah.
So I guess it's going to be a long night reading all that tonight.
Very long, yeah.
Now, you aren't queuing up to subscribe to the Skeptic magazine, are you?
Well, look, we're not new to skepticism, but we're certainly new to societal skepticism, and we absolutely loved it. So yeah, I think I'm going to get involved with that magazine. It's
cool.
Looks like a good
That's
read.
Great. And there's more books where that come from. He's got how many crates of those books you got?
I'm cutting it down. I did have 8. I did have several hundred books.
And one of those crates was just Eric von Daniken books on its own too. So yes.
Absolutely, a lot of Eric von Daniken books.
Well, enjoy your books.
Thanks, mate.
Look, I've got some more people here that actually watched the one. So what did you make of the show?
Oh, I thought it was a bit of fun.
Yeah? And, so did you think it was a good or a bad thing for skepticism for Richard to be on it?
Oh, definitely a good thing. Yeah.
Now, did you think there was anyone that was even a little bit believable that they had some otherworldly power?
No, not at all.
And so did the show make you laugh or make you angry?
Oh, I thought it was really fun.
And how did you go with the whole thing?
Oh, I loved it. I think Richard was really funny.
Yeah. So do you think it was a good thing for him to go on it?
Oh, definitely, yeah.
And was there even a moment where you thought, ooh, maybe something's happening?
Yeah, sure. A little bit of deceiving, maybe.
You sound like you might be sceptical. At times it seemed like it was the person who was the least wrong.
Or the most lucky.
It was always about luck and, people just... you can see how the experiment was set up, and I always thought the experiment could have been a bit more thorough. So, for example, with the helicopter, they were going out all in the same direction, but I thought it would have been more interesting to actually put them in the field, in the center of the field, but... they all started walking off towards the helicopter, so I thought this could have been better.
Do you think they'd ever be able to make a really balanced show about this? Because they were trying to make an entertaining show. If they were trying to make it scientific, that might have taken away from the entertainment value?
Yeah, well, I think it was more fun to see them have tantrums when it went wrong than...
So you think overall it was a good thing for skepticism for Richard to be part of it?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Look, as someone who's a member of the Skeptics, what did you make of the one?
Well, it was a little bit hard to watch, I must say. It didn't make a lot of sense. I don't think it made good television, to be quite honest.
So do you think it was good or bad for the skeptical movement, or a neutral thing to be doing?
I think it was only positive for the skeptical movement. I think it displayed pretty well to the converted that, that there are big questions around all these sorts of pseudosciences.
Now, at Skeptics at the pub tonight, there were some book giveaways. Now, our friends over there, they got most of the really good ones, but what did you put your hand up and go racing down the aisle for, young boy?
I took the Nostradamus book.
Because I've seen you at the bar quoting quatrains in the original French.
I'm going to run them through Google Translate and see what they come up with.
So is that like a bathroom book or one to have a read before you go to bed for a bit of light reading? Where does it sit on your mantelpiece?
It's just because I quite often say, call me Nostradamus, and I'd like to have just a little bit of something to back that up with.
Oh, you go able to open a book and go, when fire burns in my pants and stuff like that.
Exactly.
Well, I'm just here with some recent immigrants. How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Okay, now how did you come into the country? Did you get a balloon? Was it like 80 days in a balloon from Europe? How did you get here?
I know we actually got a small raft over from Papua New Guinea.
Wow,
so, yeah.
That's improving incredibly popular. And you found yourself at Skeptics in the pub. What did you make of our, Down Under experience?
Yeah, it's great. It was a good night. Really good fun.
Yeah. Now, what do you think about the show that Richard was talking about there? You obviously didn't get a chance to see it.
Well, we've heard about it actually through Skeptic's Guide to the Universe. So, we've kind of not seen the show, but heard enough about it. So.
And you're over here as well?
Yes, hi.
Now, what did you think of The One? Do you think doing a show like The One is a good idea for skepticism, or do you think it just endorses what most skeptics don't believe in?
It's a difficult one, isn't it? But I think if it gets the average person thinking about these things, and it's good in the end, yeah.
And what do you think? Do you think it's something they should be doing or not?
I'm not so sure. I think that there is a danger that you give people an idea that actually skepticism is, well, not necessarily skepticism, science and the scientific method is something that can be easily shown in a kind of entertainment setting. And I think that science is something that takes time, and it takes years to go through kind of meta-analysis and understand exactly how it works. I think you kind of do people a disservice sometimes to perhaps show that within a kind of half an hour show, here's the solution to a problem. I think it's dangerous sometimes to do that.
And you worry that perhaps it gives credibility to something that shouldn't have it?
I totally see the kind of the value of kind of showing kind of an entertainment purpose and getting the skepticism out there. I think that the danger is that people see that science and scientific journalism can be done in a scientist just cured cancer, rather than a particular type of cancer has become slightly more curable because of a tiny bit of evidence we've just found. And I think it doesn't make a headline, but science doesn't necessarily have to make headlines all the time. And I think there's a danger that putting it in that setting can kind of take away from that. But, yeah.
Well, we all know science can be fun, but the message does seem to get lost, particularly on someone like me who doesn't like studying, is that science actually is hard.
Absolutely. I think that, and hard and not necessarily always interesting. I think we need to explain to people that, yes, it is difficult. Yes, it is a long-term strategy. And to convince them that you can click your fingers and here's the solution, it is possibly dangerous. I mean, as I said, I totally understand the benefit of doing the PR exercise and making sure that people know that skepticism even exists. But I do think for science it needs to be explained to people that it's a long-term strategy, rather than explaining to them, here's your answer and here's kind of the X-Files solution, rather than actually a bunch of guys in a lab not doing anything particularly interesting for 6 years. End result is they've actually done something amazing.
And do you think it's probably because people always want to look for the magic bullet for everything in almost every aspect of life?
Yes, definitely, yes. Everyone wants a simple solution. We're all human, that's what we want, isn't it? But no, at the end of the day, things are more difficult than that.
Thank you for listening to the Skeptic Zone. Thank you, Maynard. I tell you what, folks, Maynard is one of our hardest working reporters, and the money he gets for it, my God, the paychecks I have to write. Well, you know what I'm going to say, of course. Maynard volunteers his time, which is why, folks, we're going to have some items up for bid pretty soon on eBay, and I'll be putting that into next week's show, that information probably on my Facebook and Twitter too. Twitter, of course, is at Skeptic Zone. We have our dear friend Brian Dunning from Skeptoid.com sent me some books, some of his books, Skeptoid 3, Pirates, Pyramids and Papyrus, with a foreword by yours truly. He signed it, I've signed it, we've got some of those books to auction. We've got the poster, as I've mentioned before, with lots of skeptical autographs. And we've got a double DVD set of 40 classic tracks from 95 to 2000. What makes that special? It's Maynard's collection. Maynard's Classics. A picture of Maynard on the cover. It's a double DVD set with lots and lots of... Oh, one of the discs is even purple. Maynard's Classics, 95 to 2000. That will be going up for auction pretty soon on eBay, and that will be autographed by Maynard himself. Anyway, I think that's enough for this week's show. Thank you for listening. Thank you again, Maynard, for filling in the whole show with those fantastic and interesting interviews. But until next week, This is Richard Saunders signing off from the... Uh-oh. You know what? During the show, the clouds have come over. What? Oh, well. Richard Saunders signing off from a now overcast Sydney, Australia.
You've been listening to the Skeptic Zone. Visit our website at www.skepticzone.tv for comments, contacts, and extra video reports.